For this video, I've got a brand new in the box, lifelike F40PH from the original run in the late 1970s. Normally I don't have much interest in these less expensive lifelike diesels, but these were built a bit differently from the ones that you usually see, which I found to be kind of intriguing, so when I came across this, I decided to pick it up. So for this video, we'll be looking at a bit of the history of the model, as well as pulling it apart to make sure everything's working right, and then I'll finish up by giving it a thorough review. For a brief history of the model, I gathered some information from the HO Scale Trains resource from Tony Cook, as well as HO Seeker for their catalogs, and a couple other places here and there. And the F40PH was released in HO Scale in 1978, with the two railroad names being Amtrak and RCA, or Regional Transportation Authority. And there was also a special edition at some point, an all chrome-plated Amtrak version called the $100,000 Loco, with $100,000 being the approximate cost to develop the shell. Now this model used the unidrive chassis that had been developed a year earlier for the F7 and GP38, and I found the advertising for this to be kind of hilarious, so I've brought up the F7 catalog page here, which we can look through real quick. They call it the greatest engineering breakthrough and technological advance ever introduced in HO locomotives by lifelike. I think the key being there being by lifelike, because of course there were far more advanced and high quality models available at the time, but anyway, some of those technological and engineering breakthroughs include a working headlight, which of course had been featured for decades before this, a one-piece plastic frame, which had already been developed by other manufacturers decades before this, a new powerful 5-pole motor, which was actually not new. It was just a cheapened version of the motor introduced in the Varney catalog in 1962. And then, of course, new strong ball shaft universals, which, of course, they just were the same as many other universal designs at the time. And their strength is debatable, which you'll see later. New additional weight, which I don't really know what's so new about weight. And then going into the truck, they show the whole new chassis system, unidrive system, being a new idler gear system, allows motor to log more easily while starting at crawl speeds, new oil light bearings, new helical cut nylon gears, which actually in reality they are not helically cut, which you'll also see later, they are straight. Traction tire drive wheels, increased pulling power. I'm surprised they forgot to mention that those were new traction tire drive wheels. New fully enclosed gearbox with cover that securely snap locks into place. And yeah, new unidrive universal joint attaches directly to one-piece reduction worm gear. I think they forgot to mention new in a few places there. Well, anyway, moving on from that. Over the next couple of years, they would introduce it in more railroad names, including MBTA and Go Transit. So they were sticking with actual railroad names at this point, which was definitely good. Kept it more realistic. But then over time, as they moved into train sets and accessories more, they would start to introduce it in additional railroads, some realistic, some not. Such as the realistic ones, they would have like New Jersey Transit, Metra, Caltrain. Those were all good, those are all fine, but then they would also have additional railroads such as Union Pacific and Burlington Northern and eventually Santa Fe. And Tony Cook found it especially funny that they would put a big realistic sticker over the Union Pacific one, which of course never existed in real life. Sometime in the early to mid 80s, along with the rest of Lifelike's diesels, they would quietly switch from the unidrive chassis to the Bachmann copy pancake motor drive truck. And this is how the models would continue to be made through the rest of their production life. So starting off the video, just looking over the packaging a little bit, You've got the features tag here, which is kind of interesting with their 5-pole unidrive motor, as they called it. Working headlight, which absolutely no one like Ather and Tyco or Bachmann had at that time, so that's quite the feature. And then your authentic Blumberg trucks, which I guess these were pretty new development at the time, but I think some others had already made them anyway in this style. But yeah, anyway, they've got their advertising there, a few of their products around the sides. And in the back includes, let's see, included in this package, inside this package, a whole list of tips and other things. And Unidrive and Posidrive. It's kind of interesting. It's almost like they're using the names you would see in like real life full-size cars from the time, like Positraction and all that. Just think that's kind of funny. Lifelike Loco Report on the inside. Well, anyway, might as well get into it. Now this model, I think it had at least been opened a couple times before I bought it, because it had been tested at one point and found to not be working, which of course for these, from what I understand, was pretty common. Let's see, cardboard insert, but this is the only thing inside. Collector's train cards. That's funny. I'm sure everyone was collecting those and having a great time. But you get your bit of information there. F40PH with their weight, maximum speed. So it's actually kind of a nice card, really. So keep that with the box. Engine itself is in this nice styrofoam shell. Keeps it nice and protected. And it looks like it's in pretty good shape overall. Just a tiny mark here and there. Yeah, that looks pretty nice. Nice and clean. Got your nickel wheels there instead of the black and brass ones that came along later. I see where they've been on the track just a little bit, but this definitely doesn't have any runtime on it. So those tires, they still look pretty clean. They've still got a little bit of grip too. So these are not dried out or cracking, which is definitely good. Definitely a different mechanism from their pancake motor drives. Anyway, to take this apart, might as well go ahead and get inside, see what we're working with. There we go. Slip that over the coupler, just like that. And there is your original lifelike F40PH chassis. There's your Unidrive motor, which is really just a Pitman clone, of course. And I don't think it was even originally called Unidrive. I can't remember if it was Varnier Penline. Well, looked at that in the history, but anyway, this motor had been around before the lifelike name even existed. Got your headlight there, which does not go to any sort of headlight bar, so that shines into the cab and probably hopes to pass just a little bit through the lenses there, which I'm sure some gets to it, but not much. And of course there won't be any lights in the back either. This weight here is something I'm very familiar with, and it's something that you would have seen in quite a few of my other videos, because at some point I picked up one of these weights from the junk drawers at a hobby store, and it's served as one of my most oddly useful model railroading tools for when I'm working on different models, like soldering together a kit chassis from one of those British steam engine kits, just lining up the axles on there, and then just works really nice to hold things together and nice and straight, and then using it to hammer other things. But anyway, enough of that. Let's see, I just need to remove a couple screws here. That weight does give it a nice amount of heft. You take that out, there's basically nothing left. It barely weighs anything. I'm guessing most of that is coming from the motor. Yeah, there we go. Just right away I see that there's a crack in that universal. So that is just gonna slip all around, I'm sure. And what about this one? Yep, also cracked. So definitely plastic shrinkage issues here. Now as for how to get things apart, I think there's just this one screw holding the motor on. Could be wrong there. Nope, that was holding the fuel tank on. Interesting. Then the motor has the screw right there. Very magnetically charged screw. There. Now pull that off. And I was right, the chassis doesn't weigh anything once you take the motor out. Turns nice and free. I suspect that motor will work perfectly with nothing but a couple drops of oil. As for what to do about this universal, I might try fixing it first. Same for this one. But before I do that, might as well get a little further down into the model. Got a clip right here. Just push that back. Pull it out. And the truck drops right out of the engine. Very interesting design here. Everything's turning nice and freely. So it seems like that's all in good shape. So hopefully that means there aren't any split gears inside. But keep going down into there to make sure of that. These are the same covers that they continue to use on the F40 and GP38, at least for the front truck, or the non-motorized truck, all the way up to the end of production. Oh, I do feel slipping there. So there could be a crack in that gear. Yep, that gear is cracked. You can see right there, so that's just slipping around. And that means it's going to bind up too, so definitely have to do something about that. Same for this one. So lots of splits and cracks in the mechanical parts of these old lifelike models. So this definitely isn't one to own if you don't have some experience or ability to repair things like that. But you do get a brass worm, which is nice. It's a lot better than those awful plastic worms that they had in that old F7. Metal bearings too. And the rest of these gears, perfectly fine. A little rough running. Maybe the truck sides help with that. Yeah, those turn perfectly fine. Not going to be the quietest gears, but no problems. Pull them out anyway, just to make sure that they're nice and clean. So that is the full disassembly of the mechanism for these old lifelikes. Starting off with repairing the universal, I've already done one here just as a test to see what would do best. So what I'm doing is, first I'm just kind of squeezing it together while drilling out the hole so that it has a bit more of a slip fit onto the shaft. And then I will use the side of a soldering iron to kind of melt that together. And once that was going on without breaking it, I put a drop of super glue into the hole, a little baking soda onto the shaft, and put them together, and that seems to be holding pretty strong. So I'm going to do the same for the universal that fits onto the motor. You can see the split right there. Just squeeze it together like that. Take the drill bit. When you have too tight of a press fit with plastic parts and don't account for shrinkage, they'll end up shrinking around the shaft, and then the stress is too much and they end up cracking. Okay, so anyway, see how that goes onto the motor. That's still a really tight fit on there, enough to spread the crack out, which you can see. All right, I'll drill that out a little more. I don't think I'm going to get much better than that, so might as well just finish up with what we've got, because unlike a gear, this doesn't have to be quite so tight. Okay, so that kind of closes up that gap. Take that back off. Drop a super glue in the hole. A little bit of baking soda for the motor shaft. And just put those two together until, yeah, the end of that is where it needs to be. Brush that off. And I think that'll work just fine. And as long as I'm holding onto the motor, might as well add some oil. So just a drop into that bearing. And a drop into that one. And then a little more into the oil pad here. And the motor turns nice and freely, so I think that'll be a good runner. Now I have one axle gear fixed, and the way that I did this is a little more complicated than the universal. So this is a 3mm axle, and I tried drilling this out with a 3mm bit, but it didn't actually expand the hole at all because of the gear's flexibility. So instead, I used an 1/8 inch drill bit just to carefully open that up until it had just about a slip fit onto that shaft without spreading out. And then once it was at that point, I clamped it into my little mini vise here, just enough pressure to hold it closed, not enough to cause any damage to the teeth, and then used the soldering iron on both sides of the split, and then just made sure that the hole was nice and round on both sides and cleaned out, and that seems to have worked. So I just glued that in place, again with a bit of baking soda and super glue, and hopefully that gear will be ready to go, and I'll do the same thing with this other one here, and hope for the best. And getting on to reassembling the truck a little bit, there really isn't any cleaning to do on these gears because they're just kind of dried out. There's no visible oil aside from maybe just a little bit of yellow stain on them. So yeah, nothing to clean out. So put those back in. And the gears are also, or the gear shafts are also what hold the truck aligned, because if you try to put the sides together without them, they just slip against each other. Those shaft pins are what do all the work. So just add a little oil to these. Drop in each side for each shaft. Yeah, those turn nice and smooth. Now let's see how that repaired axle does in there. Yeah, that's doing just fine. Hopefully that'll hold up long term. So I'll get on to the other one. Okay, both gears are now fixed, hands turning smoothly. So I think this is going to work. Just oil the axles now. And then add some grease in there. Now roll that through. That should spread out pretty nicely. Now to reassemble it, you have to have the axles out. So you can take that apart and put the worm back in. Just like that. Put in a couple more drops of oil. That feels like it's turning nice and smooth. No binds or other problems. Snap that back on. So that truck is ready to go back in. Just slip that through and snap the ring back in. I think I can do this. There we go. Just have to get around to that post in the back. Okay, it's snapped back on. Oops. Put this universal back in. There's the motor. So there's the motion of that universal. Having it out on this end instead of centered over the pivot point means that that universal is likely going to make more grinding noises going around curves. But as long as it works, that's what matters here. Slip that back over. And these wheels could use some oil, I think. Now it's coming. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this one doesn't have the little plastic spring pin inside like the pancake drive trucks do. So in that case, all I need to do is just put a little oil into the axles. And since those are smoothly polished wheels, they're turning just fine against those contacts. All of that one back here, it's kind of tight, so I think I'm just gonna bend those in a little bit. Take off some of the tension. You want to have enough tension for good electrical contact. But if you have too much, all it does is add resistance to the wheels, so it doesn't roll as well. That feels a little better. That explains why pulling the coupler down didn't release this. It's part of the truck. I thought they would have just used the same cover that they did for this side. Okay. Now that's back together. And before I put the weight on, might as well hook that up real quick. Yeah, that's turning nice. So I'll just put these last two screws in, get the shell on, and get it to track testing. And there it is. Gotta keep that truck straight. Everything's working fine. I don't feel any problems with those gears. Alright, so that is how you do repairs and maintenance on these early Lifelikes. Now, while I was doing some test running, I did notice that even though this has a 14:1 gear ratio in the truck, which should give it pretty high torque, it actually doesn't have much power at all, so the motor struggles to, well, of course there are traction tires on the wheels, but the motor struggles to slip them at all and can be stalled pretty easily. So I thought I would try remagnetizing it a little bit, or seeing if it is at its full capacity or not. So, yeah, I've got to turn around that way. Yeah, just before here, there's 12 volts. So as I've used this remagnetizer, I found that sometimes it actually ends up working better to put the charge directly through the magnetic field where the armature is at. So we'll see what happens when I do that. Well, no change really. Current draw is the same, speed is the same. So I guess that magnet really is at its full capacity then. It's just not a very strong one, so the motor doesn't get a lot of torque. Well, okay then. It was worth a try. All right, there it is on the track. Now let's see if this really is the ultimate miracle breakthrough of model railroading technology that they claim it to be. And it takes off nice and smooth, I'll give it that. I wouldn't exactly call it silent. It's got a little wobble, but it's not bad. You hear a little bit of a surging motion in there. I don't think all those gears are perfectly rounded. Not sure if it's the axle gears or one of the idlers, but you probably just got the mesh a little bit too tight. Crank that up to full speed. As I suspected, the light is mostly in the cab. Honestly, that's a better runner than I expected. It's certainly not as good as the Athearns or Atlas or some of the others of the time, but for an inexpensive model, this really isn't too bad. I'm not liking that reverse noise so much. Might just need a little bit of time to run in though. Yeah, I think this is better going forward. And now it's time to get on to the review portion of this video. So to start out, I'll be looking at the shell and the overall detail of the whole thing. Now when Lifelike released this model, this is one that they were especially proud of compared to their other diesels up to that time. And seeing the overall detail and look of the whole thing, I think they had every right to be, because they really did develop a very nice shell for this model. Starting off with the cab area, I think they captured the look and dimensions of the F40PH very well here. It really looks very good overall. Even the grab irons have pretty sharp molding to them that doesn't look so out of place compared to some other models that I've seen with the similar moldings on them. It's still nicer to have separate grab irons, of course, but for a late 70s model, this really isn't bad. And looking at the window glass, you'll notice that it has a very nice fit into the window holes there, which even more expensive models from the same time had trouble achieving that. So that's really very well done. What isn't so well done in front though is the pilot, which actually there is no front pilot at all. All they have is the snowplow with the open end for the coupler to go through, so there's not even a wall behind it to represent the pilot. So that just ends up being kind of an odd see-through area, and is probably the most glaring mistake of the shell that they did here on an otherwise very nice model. Moving on to the side, they also did this area very well. You can see that the moldings are all very clean, straight, and sharp. The ventilation looks very good. There's really very little to no imperfection in any of the plastic, so that's all a very well done piece there. You get very cleanly molded rivets and other details. And once again, some grab irons molded on, as well as the door handles. And I think that this is all done very well. Really the only thing that hurts the detail at all on the side is the plastic tabs where the shell snaps on, but if you give that a little bit of silver paint to match after snapping the shell on, that should help to cover up some of that. The other side of the model looks just as good. Once again, very clear, sharp, and clean moldings. I think about the only imperfection I see on this side aside from the tabs, of course, is it looks like there's a little bit of excess paint filling some of the ventilation there, but otherwise, all very well done. And then looking at the back, this is also well scaled, looks very good, more very sharp and clean moldings. And the molded handrail here looks quite a bit better than others that I've seen from the same era, that some of them were way too thick or just weren't molded very cleanly at all, or had very little detail to them. So even if this isn't as good as a wire or metal railing that you'd find on some other models like Athearn's, it's still very good. It's at least as good as what you would find on the Atlas models of the same time. Now again, there is an open pilot back here, just very simple, little to no detail at all, just a slight presence is all you get. So at least that's not something that you see quite as much, but again, it's nicer to have closed pilots. On the roof of the model, the radiator vents are molded very cleanly. There's no fan detail or anything underneath, but that's just fine on a model of this era. I don't really expect to see that on most of them, even the more expensive ones. So just having those clean, sharp moldings there, I think is good enough on its own. Then you have the other roof details, such as the exhaust vent, which is properly painted silver compared to photos of the real number 229 from the same era. You've got your dynamic brake, and then you've got your horns there. These are a pretty simple molding, so not quite the best parts I've seen, but at least they're there, and they're pretty fine. And then these here are the little flashing beacon lights, or they would be on the real one. This one, they're just little bits of plastic molded in, and then they're painted over, so those don't look quite the best because of that. If you're wanting to do some customization, you could pretty easily cut those out, drill holes there, and put real lights in their place, real flashing lights, and that would improve the look of the model. But overall, that's all well done, I would say, and no real major problems there to speak of. Comparing to photos, the paint of the model is overall accurate. They definitely got the size, shape of the lines, as well as the division between the silver and black, all correct. That looks good. Even going around to the back, the black extends down to there, just goes straight across appropriately, so that's all well done. Really, the only mistakes at all that I can point out in the paint are there's a little bit of unevenness in the white stripes here that you can see. The red is maybe a shade too light. That should be a little bit darker, and then the blue maybe a touch lighter. I'm not 100% sure on that, but at least the red should be darker. The Amtrak logo and 229 on the back, those are pretty close to the correct size. They're in the correct locations. They are just a little bit too large. The lettering should be slightly smaller from what I've seen, but it's close enough that for the most part, it's really not that noticeable. Overall, it's a very well done paint job that they've done on this. And now looking at the trucks, they of course have the correct Blomberg side frames as noted on the box. And for the time, these are overall pretty good. Parts, I would say, they're definitely outclassed by the Athearn trucks that came out only a few years later, as well as really pretty much any other truck of this style that's been made in HO scale. So they were very quickly outclassed and outdated by the competition, but when they were first released, they at least looked decent. The detailing on them is pretty flat, I would say. The size of the side frames is correct. I compared that to other measurements just to be sure, and the size is correct, or at least close enough in most areas. The wheels themselves, they are oversized though. They are scale 43.5 inches. Plus they've got those large flanges on them, so that ends up giving it kind of a toy-like appearance, and the wheelbase is just slightly off. You can see that this is a little bit forward from where it should be, so the trucks, they don't look the best, but they're at least good enough for an inexpensive model. And now looking over to the fuel tank. This one has the correct rear set fuel tank that was found on the number 229, so that is accurate. The overall scaling and size of it also seems to be good too. It's even got the little fuel cap, fuel filler detail, whatever that, or maybe that's just a gauge, well, whatever it is right there, as well as the access door right here, and it's also got the 2 air tanks right there. Now these tanks are definitely the most simplistic that are on there, and with their supports they look a bit toyish in comparison to the rest of it, really, because for the most part it's a good looking fuel tank area. Nothing really special or spectacular, but good enough. The one real problem that I have with the chassis of this model as far as detail goes is that it sits about a scale foot too high, so that raises the body and the rest of the model really way too high above where it should be. Now when it's on its own, you don't really notice that too much, but when you compare it to another model, it suddenly becomes extremely obvious just how high the lifelike F40 is sitting on its chassis. So I think they could have easily done much better with that, but for some reason they raised it way up, and I'm not sure why. So I think that's about all there is to say about the detail, and I can definitely see why it was popular for a long time to use this shell on high quality Protopower West chassis with the Athearn trucks and Mishima motor and flywheels. You would get a good looking model that ran just as well as your other high-end ones. Now let's get on to the running portion of this review. Of course, you've already seen it running just from before I started the review portion, after I fixed it. It's a bit of a noisy one. It's got a little bit of a wobble to it too. But overall, it's not a bad runner. Takes off smoothly enough. It's got good speed control. As you get up to full speed, the noise definitely gets turned way up on this. It's not a quiet runner by any means. The motor isn't exactly efficient in this model. When it's running free at 12 volts on straight track, it's averaging about 0.4 amps. Of course, a little bit of that goes to the light bulb, but then when it goes around the curve, that adds some resistance to it, and then that can bring it up to about 0.45 amps. And for the measured speed at 12 volts, I found that to be about 130 scale miles per hour on average. Sometimes it was a little bit quicker, sometimes a little bit slower, so I just had to average it out. So that's about 25 miles per hour over the maximum speed of the F40PH at the time that they were making these. So better to be able to go a little bit faster than have it go too slow, because then you can achieve full passenger speed just by not turning up the voltage all the way, where if it was too slow, you'd be stuck with that slower speed. So the 130 mile per hour top speed I would say is okay for this one, because you can work with it. And as for slow speed, it doesn't do too bad overall, really, thanks to the 14:1 gear ratio. Now the motor in here, it doesn't really have the best low speed stability, so sometimes it kind of sometimes you kind of have to fight with it a little bit to keep going, where I'm kind of moving the voltage dial up and down a little bit just to keep it from stalling. But maintaining the best slow speed I could, I managed to get 6 scale miles per hour out of it. So really that's not bad at all. And if you had a better motor in this, I have no doubt that it could maintain a much better low speed. So really the mechanism in this isn't too bad. It's a very free rolling one, and yeah, a better motor, which you could even get a very inexpensive basic can motor and probably see a pretty nice performance improvement out of it. That'll drop a lot of the noise too, because I think probably more than half of that noise is coming from the motor itself. Especially those bearings, they dried out pretty quickly and started making that extra bearing noise at lower speed, which is always a bit of a frustration. That just comes from sloppy build quality. Now, thanks to that large weight in the model, it comes in at a pretty hefty 15.6, 15.7 ounces. So even if it didn't have the traction tires in back, I think it would still be able to pull a decent load of cars since the weight is mostly focused over the rear truck. And with the traction tires, I did just a little bit of testing there. I couldn't really do too much since I don't have a proper pull meter, but just using the scale here and letting it push against it, I got it up to about 5 ounces before the tires started to bounce and slip on the track. Now, as for how many cars that 5 ounces of traction equals, from my own testing with free-rolling freight cars, that comes up to about 60, maybe 62 free-rolling freight cars on level track. But this is more than likely going to be pulling Fleet passenger cars, which of course are longer and heavier and have inside bearings instead of needlepoint bearings. Now, because of that, you'll only be able to pull maybe about 15, 20 Fleet cars, I would say. And that's still a more than realistic load. But at the same time, with the motor that's in there, I don't know if it would actually like pulling that many for too long, so I would keep it below 10 Fleet passenger cars, or if for some reason you decide to couple it up to freight cars, maybe limit it to about 25 or 30, just to keep the stress off of the motor. So to summarize this review, Lifelike's F40PH I think is an overall good attempt at the model for the late 1970s, and an especially good one for the company at that time, representing really the best they had to offer for diesel models in the late 1970s. The detail of the model, although not without its problems, it's very good. It looks very good overall for its age. Even with the molded on grab irons and a few other things, it's all very cleanly done, so I think most of those just little cheapenings and small inaccuracies can be forgiven. Really, the only problem I have with it at all is those open pilots and the fact that it sits too high on its trucks. And as for the running part of this model, the chassis, this isn't one that I can recommend to anyone who doesn't want to do some repairs, since split gears and universals seem like they're pretty much guaranteed. In that case, you'd be better off going with the later versions with the pancake motor drive. But if you can fix these up, they're definitely good running models. They've got smooth running gearing for the most part. The motor, it's a pretty good runner, and it has a lot of weight to it, so it can pull a lot of cars behind. So if you can do the repair work on it, it's going to be a decent runner for you. Now, of course, if you want the best possible F40, you're not going to be looking at these. You're going to be going with Kato or Rapido or Bachmann Spectrum, like the other one that I have, which I use for a little bit of comparison here. But if all you want is a decent, low-cost model, then even these can be found for pretty cheap. This one, basically mint condition, I bought it for about $30 plus shipping, so I'd consider that to be a good deal. And the ones with the pancake motors, they cost pretty much the same, or maybe even a little bit less, since they're so common. So if you're looking at one of these, you're not going to be spending much, and you're getting a good value overall.